All right, in this video, we're going to be talking about series and sequences, but we are mostly going to be focusing in on the recursive relation part of series and sequences. All right, so let's talk a little bit about series and sequences. Let me just circle. There we go. That's what we're going to be doing. All right, so a series and sequence is these are two very basic series and series here, or sequences. So if you notice, like the very first one, you are adding 5, and if you notice that you are continuing that through every single sequence. All right. Same thing for the next one. If you notice that you're not adding anymore, now you're multiplying. So you're multiplying by 2. You're doubling every single time. And if you notice, it continues every single time. All right. So what we have here is a series and sequence. Now, the recursive relation is actually probably the most basic observation you're going to make about this. So let's just go ahead and get started. All right. So a couple things to pay attention to, and that is, first off, whenever you see A of n, that always means next number, because you're going to answer in the form of a notation. So if you're looking at my screen right now, you your formula will be something very similar to what I just boxed in. Okay, and I did kind of a bad job of it. Let me try it again. So this is what you're going to do. All right. So you're going to answer in the form of the formula. So whenever you see like an A of n, that always means next number. If you see A of 1, that means the first term. And if you see this right here, A of n minus 1, that is notation for the previous number. Okay. So just kind of keep all that in mind as we answer the first question. So here we go. Pretty simple. It says here that to get your next number, A of n, you have to take the previous number and then times it by 2. Okay, so this is a whole the notation is very simply, and I'm going to write it out just to make it easy for you, and that is the next number. To get the next number, you take the previous number, and then in this case, you're going to times by 2. Okay, so we are going to create a quick 3 or 4 number sequence. Okay, now going back to what we just did over here, notice that we have, like the very first one, we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. All right, so that's a 5 number sequence. Very similar to what we're doing this next one here. Okay, so let's go ahead and put some blanks in here, because remember, I'm a blank guy. I like to have blanks because a blank reminds me something's got to go in there. So first, second, that's the third number of the sequence, fourth number of the sequence, fifth number of the sequence. So in our directions, it says that the first number is 2. So the first number in our sequence is 2. Okay. Now, this is my next number of the sequence right here. It says in the formula, you take the next number, or you take the previous number and you just times it by 2. So very simply, what you're going to do is you're going to take the number before it, which is 2, and basically you're just doubling it. And so to get this number here, to get that number there, you just take the number before it, multiply by 2. To get this number here, again, take the number before, which is 8, and you get 16. I know it's not asking, but to get this number here, how do you get the next number? Easy. You look at the number in front of it and just simply times it by 2. All right. Oh, that's supposed to be a 2. 2. There you go. All right. So for the next question here, very similar. If you can read the notation, it says, in order to get the next number, you take the previous number, whatever it is, and then you times it by -3. All right. So again, that's all we need. So I'm going to go ahead and write some blanks down so I can go ahead and get my sequence written. 4 and 5. Okay. So I'm going to type this just to make it a little easier. It says the very first number is -3. -3. Okay. That's it. That's my first number. In fact, I'm going to make it a little bigger. All right. Might be a little too big, but we're just going to go with it. -3. So to get my next number, all I do is take my previous number and just times it by -3, which gets +9. To get my third number in the sequence, you take the number before it, which was 9, times it by 3, -27. To get the next number, you simply take 27 and times it by 3. And I believe it ends up being 81. And then guess what? To get the next number, you take the previous number, which is 81, times it by -3. And I think it ends up being -242. So that's all you're doing. Very simple. All right. If you look at question number 3, it says, hopefully you can do this by now, but it says right here, a of n is equal to a of n minus 1 times 5. So that means to get to the next number, you just take whatever's in front of it and just times it by 5. So I'm not going to do the blanks. I'm just going to kind of speed up a little bit. It says that a of 1 is 2, so the first number in my sequence is 2. And then my next one, I'm going to times it by 5 to get 10. The next one, I'm going to times it by 5 to get 50. The next one, I'm going to times it by 5 to get 250. The next one, times it by 5, 1,250, I believe. So if you notice again, what you're doing every single time is timesing it by 5. Okay. Now, here's our next question. Now we're no longer creating the sequence. The sequence is given to us. So now what we do is create the formula. Okay. Now let me go ahead and tell you, when it comes to recursive formula, this is all you're doing. You already have a of n is equal to a of n minus 1 something. All right. That's kind of the blueprint here. In fact, let me go ahead and get the correct, no, this is supposed to, there we go, and there it is. All right, just to make it. All right, so a lot of this is all observational. Okay, so you look at you look at question number 1. It says you're at 35. Now you're at 32. Now you're at 29. Now you're at 26. What are you doing? Well, what you're doing is you are subtracting 3 every time. So guess what you're going to do? You already have, to get the next number, you take the previous number and simply subtract 3 from it. That's all you're doing. Okay? Let's look at question number 2. All right, for question number 2, it says create an equation. Well, I already know most of it. Everything else is just observation. So you're at -3, now you're at -23, now you're at -43, now you're at -63. What are you doing every single time? Well, I'm subtracting by 20 every single time. So that means my missing number in my formula here will be -20. It's supposed to be that's supposed to be a 20. All right. There you go, -20. All right. And so you do the same thing. In fact, I mean, at this point, it's so easy. It's kind of picking and choosing here. So let's do one down here. All right. I'll give you a second. Look at question number 6. You're starting with 9. Now you have 14. Now you have 19. Now you have 24. Again, what are you doing to one number to get to the next number? Well, hopefully you know enough about our numerical system and you know that we are adding 5. So very simply, I'm just going to take this and say times 5. That's all you're doing. All right. Just copy that just in case we might need it again. All right, let's look at the next one. All right. So for the next one here, just looking at question number 1 of this section, it says create a recursive rule for the following questions. If you cannot, right, okay, so if you notice question number 1, this is a little tricky here. Just, it's tricky if you don't know much about the numerical system, all right? So notice that you're at -1, now you're at 6, now you're at -36, now you're at +216. Notice what you're doing is that you are multiplying by 6, but it's going negative, positive, negative, positive. So that means not only are you timesing it by negative, or I'm sorry, not only are you multiplying it by 6, but you're actually multiplying it by -6. So you're going to times by -6. Okay? Let's go with, I'm just going to choose question 4. All right, question 4, you're at -3. Now you're at -15. Now you're at -75. Now you're at -375. What you're doing is you're multiplying by 5 every single time. All right. So very simply, you just say, I'm taking my previous number and then timesing it by 5. That's all you're doing. All right. Now, the last thing we're going to go over is it says create a recursive rule for the following geometric sequence. All right. So again, creating a recursive rule means I need my formula. So let me get my formula. And luckily, I'm doing this electronically, so I don't have to rewrite this every single time. Now, notice what we have here. We have the first term, we have the second term. We don't know the third, fourth, fifth. Well, this is easy. The first one's easy. You're at -6, you're at -12. Hopefully, you know if you're at -6, then you're at -12. And if it's geometric, it means you're multiplying. So what'd you do to -6 to get -12? I just times it by 2. So times it by 2. Okay. Now, the next question, all right, let me go ahead and get this. Let's make another one. All right, so the next question is, now we're at the first term, which is 108. Notice we skipped something. We skipped this one, and then we went to the third term. So we don't know what is going on when we, trying to get my computer to work. Hold on. So we don't know what we multiplied to get this number and then what we multiplied to get this number. Okay? Now, here's a couple of rules. Okay? When you're trying to figure out what you multiply by, here's rule number 1. All right? So rule number 1 is, here we go. Number 1, take the later term and divide by early term. All right, so take the later term and then divide by the early term. Now you might be thinking, well, what the heck are you talking about? What I mean by the later term is the term that came later in the sequence. So this is the third term, so this would come later in the sequence. All right, later in the sequence, which means this is the early term. I'm just going to write E because I don't want to write with my mouse. Okay. Now, the next thing is, here we go. Take the root based on the number of jumps. All right. Now, this is a lot of Coach Fordisms going on right now. All right. So it says take the root. All right. Let's go ahead and divide first. All right. So what we have is 388 divided by 108. Let's go ahead and do that first. All right. So up here, 3,888. Divide that by the early term, which is 108. We get, I want to say it's 64. Oh, sorry, 36. My bad. It's 36. Okay. Now it says take the root based on the number of jumps. Okay. So let me kind of clean this up a little bit. So think of it like you're on A1. All right. So think of it like you're a frog. You're on A1. Okay. So I'm on A1. I want to get to A3. So I'm going to have to hop one time. That's one jump. Hop again. So that's 2 jumps. All right. So what I did was I took 2 jumps, which means I'm going to take the square root. All right. So I took 2 jumps, which means I'm going to take the square root. So very simply, I'm going to take the square root of 36, and it's going to equal 6. So what that means is I am multiplying by 6 every single time. So I'm timesing it by 6 to get my next number. I'm going to times that by 6 to get my next number, which means from the recursive formula, I'm just multiplying by 6. That's all I'm doing. Multiplying by 6. There you go. Now, let's take a look at this one. Okay, so again, we're still using this formula or this relationship to do this one. All right, so notice the later term in the sequence is 768. That's the later term. This is the early term. All right, so step 1 says take my early term. So 768, I'm going to divide that by 12, and that's I bet you that's where my 64 came from. There it is, 64. Okay, now let's take a look at the jumps. All right, the jumps. We're here. Jump, jump, jump. We had to jump 3 places, so that means 3 jumps. So 3 jumps equals the third root. So I'm going to take the third root of 64. All right, so when I take the third root of 64, just spacing that out a little bit so when I write it, it's not going to look bad here. So when I take the third root of 64, it ends up being 4. So that means I'm multiplying 4 every single time. So that means my recursive formula is going to be the previous term. So that means every single time I am multiplying by 4. All right, so times 4. There we go. Now, the last one here, and that is arithmetic. So that means I'm adding every single time. So that means I'm adding something to here, to get to here, to get to here, and then get to 26. Okay? So these steps are very similar to the steps up here. Okay? So I know we're running a little long. I'm going to try to get this over as quick as possible. So for step 1, here we go. Rather than dividing it, take the later term and and subtract, by early term. And then step 2 is divide by the number of jumps. All right, so very similar to what we did up there, except now we're just subtracting rather than dividing, and then rather than taking the root, we're going to divide. So my later term is 26. I'm going to subtract that by 5. All right, so 26 minus 5 gives me 21. Now, how many jumps did I do? Let's see. I was at 5. Hop, 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 which means I divided by 3. That means I'm getting 7. So what that means is I had to add 7 to get to the next number, which means I had to add 7 to get to the next number, which means I added 7 to get to 26. So when you do the math, well, actually we already did the math, but when you do the formula, it's going to be, to get to my next term, I just take the previous term and add 7. That's it. Let's look at this last one. Now, this is pretty simple because all you're doing is just subtracting and then dividing. So taking the last term, the later term, divided by the early term, and let's see how many jumps there are. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 jumps. That was supposed to be hot, but my computer messed up. All right, so the later term is 120 minus the early term, which is 108. That gives me 12. Let's say 1, 2, 3, and I had 4 jumps, so I'm going to divide by 4, which means I'm adding 3. So I'm adding 3 every single time, and then we have ourselves the recurrence rule, which is every single time you're taking the previous number, you're adding 3 to it to get to the, it's supposed to be a computer screwing up on me now. To get to, here we go. Let's see if I can do it. Oh, it's working now. So I take the previous number and add 3. Alrighty, that's it. Hope you learned something. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.